More men are choosing silence, not because they are empty, but because they are tired. I have watched this decision form slowly, not loudly, not with anger. It happens after too many explanations that went nowhere, after realizing presence is often mistaken for availability. Some call it avoidance, others call it fear, but that is not what it feels like from inside. What looks like withdrawal is often a quiet form of self-respect. Men are learning how often they were valued for function, not for being. How listening became obligation, and patience slowly turned into self-erasure. So staying single stops feeling like loss. It begins to feel like oxygen returning to the lungs. Not loneliness, but space. Not bitterness, but relief held carefully. And once you feel that calm, it becomes hard to trade it back. The quiet shift in male social behavior. The silence from the beginning does not disappear here, it simply settles deeper. What I began noticing was not anger, but a gradual reduction in social reach. Men were not avoiding connection, they were reducing unnecessary exposure. Conversations became shorter, invitations more selective, explanations increasingly rare. This was not about disliking people, but about conserving something finite. Time, attention, emotional energy, once spent carelessly, now felt expensive. Many learned that constant availability quietly trains others to demand more. Being reliable slowly turned into being expected, then taken for granted. So distance was introduced, not as punishment, but as regulation. Not cutting ties, just loosening the grip. And once that shift happens, the reason becomes class. Emotional self-protection disguised as independence. After that first withdrawal, another pattern becomes easier to see. What looks like independence is often careful emotional shielding, not because closeness is unwanted, but because it once came with cost. Many learned that openness invited confusion, not understanding, that sharing depth required translating feelings that were rarely received intact. So restraint replaced expression, not from coldness, but from memory. When emotions were offered freely, they were often redefined or minimized. Strength was praised, vulnerability quietly redirected back into usefulness. Over time, the body learns before the mind admits it, and this self-protection starts shaping choices long before labels appear. The growing mismatch between expectation and inner capacity. After self-protection settles in, another tension quietly takes shape. Expectations continue to grow, even as inner capacity becomes more measured. Not because men have less to give, but because they finally feel the cost. Roles multiply faster than recovery ever does. Partner, provider, stabilizer, listener, all without pause. What drains most is not effort, but the absence of reciprocity. Giving began to feel like two-person because they feel like four-handle instead of presence, and exhaustion arrived without visible struggle. When capacity and expectation stop aligning, distance starts making emotional sense. Withdrawal as a response to relational fatigue. When expectations outweigh capacity, fatigue does not announce itself loudly. It shows up as hesitation before replying, pauses before agreeing. Not because care is gone, but because recovery has become necessary. Many men did not feel hurt. They felt overextended. Too many moments required steadiness when they themselves felt unsteady. So withdrawal emerged as a way to breathe, not to disappear. Stepping back was less about others, more about preserving coherence, about staying intact rather than slowly fragmenting. And once rest is felt again, engagement no longer feels automatic.
A long sigh.
Solitude as a space for identity regulation. After stepping back, solitude stops feeling like absence and starts feeling functional. Time alone becomes less about hiding, more about recalibrating the self. Without constant input, inner signals grow clearer again. Preferences return, limits sharpen, reactions slow down. Men notice how often their identity was shaped by immediate response, by who needed them next or expected steadiness without interruption. Solitude creates a neutral space where nothing is being asked, where worth is not measured by usefulness or emotional output. And in that quiet, a more stable sense of self begins to reappear. The fear of being needed more than being known. As solitude stabilizes the self, another realization quietly surfaces. Being needed once felt like proof of value. Over time, it began to feel like being reduced. Needed for strength, for solutions, for emotional containment, rarely for confusion, doubt, or unfinished thoughts. So connection started to feel conditional, even when intentions were kind. To be needed is safe, predictable, socially rewarded. To be known is uncertain, slower, and harder to maintain. Many men sense that only one of these was truly welcome, and that awareness subtly reshapes how close they are willing to stand. Choosing singleness is psychological boundary, not defeat. After all these quiet adjustments, singleness stops feeling like a reaction. It begins to feel like a boundary that finally holds, not built from resentment, but from accumulated self-knowledge, from knowing how easily peace can be disrupted and how slowly it returns. Staying single becomes less about avoiding relationships, more about refusing to abandon internal stability again. This choice is rarely announced and almost never defended. It is simply, will only be allowed if it fits. Staying single, for many men, is not a statement made outward. It is an internal agreement reached quietly, after enough lived contrast, not against love, closeness, or shared life, but against losing shape while trying to hold everything together. This calm did not come from isolation, but from discernment, from noticing what drains, what steadies, what distorts. Singleness becomes a pause that protects coherence, not an ending, a space where presence is no longer negotiated. And from that place, any future connection must arrive differently.